People of Reddit who have banged with an in-law or step-sibling or parent, what happened? How did you get into that situation, and did anyone find out? Not my stepson, but my son's best friend from high school. They had just graduated and my son had moved off to college. His friend needed a place to stay, so he rented my son's room while he was away. My son's friend was a very good tenant. He always paid his rent on time, kept the house clean, and helped with the man jobs around the house. It was about 6 weeks after he moved in when I felt he was having thoughts about me. His demeanor changed, his sentences were short, and he couldn't keep eye contact. I would make a risque double entendre and he would get visibly red. I had divorced my husband back when my son was still in high school and never really found the time to start another relationship. So the thought kinda turned me on. So one night when he came home late from a party a little tipsy, I let him know that I knew. He was quite embarrassed at first, but I told him it was alright to take off his pants and lie down. He lay down on the couch and I grabbed his ankles and knee and began tugging it towards myself. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Pulling your leg," I answered, just like everyone else reading this post. I knew there would be at least a few of these, so it's good to get it out of the way right away. The setup was good enough that I think we should leave it in though, so editor, don't cut this one. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. Did the deed with my mother-in-law once. It still makes me dirty when I think about it. I was separated from my wife at the time, in the process of divorcing, and went to my mother-in-law's house to help her with moving some furniture. We ended up sitting around after I helped and had a few cocktails, and talked about my separation to her daughter. Fast forward to midnight and 6 drinks later, and all of a sudden I'm looking at her with her jeans at her ankles and bent over the kitchen table. I swear to this day I really don't know who made the first move or how it got to that point. It was crazy. The next day she calls me and plays the whole "I had so much to drink, I don't even remember last night" card. I get it. I know it was her way of pretending like it never happened, and I was perfectly okay with doing just that. I saw her numerous times after that and neither of us acted strange. We just erased it and acted like nothing happened. At the time I was about 30 and my mother-in-law was about 50. I've never told anyone till now. Story 3. My dad had started dating following a messy divorce, and after being very coy about his activities for a few months, decided to introduce me to his girlfriend's family. We all traveled to a relative's country house and had a big party. The wine flowed pretty liberally. Eventually, it was just me and the new girlfriend's daughter who remained. We'd been getting on pretty well all night, and we were both quite drunk at this point. I stood, deciding I'd had enough fun for one night, and kissed her goodnight. One thing led to another, and we slept together. This kept up for a few months. I'm not sure if Dad ever grasped why I was so excited to visit his girlfriend's place, but I was there in a flash if the invitation was offered. Fast forward 6 or 7 years and Dad married his partner. I was a groomsman. Now I like to throw out "I have never banged my sister" in games of Never Have I Ever. Don't regret it at all. We were in our teens and we're actually good friends now. Story 4. Throwaway for obvious reasons. My biological mother died when I was about 5 years old. Dad remarried about 2 years later to a woman who had a daughter who was pretty much the same age. We got along pretty well for the most part, and years go by and nothing happened. Sometime when we were both 13, my stepmom got into a car accident and died almost instantly. We all took it really hard, especially my dad. Dad started to drink and not be very fatherly to either of us. He was depressed and rarely ever talked to us, and in turn left my stepsister and I feeling despondent and unloved. One night I woke up to the sound of my stepsister crying. I went to her room to comfort her and calm her down. We both ended up crying together and we just held each other for a long time. I kissed her and went to go and leave, but for some reason, don't really know why, we just kept kissing for a while. Eventually, we just ended up banging. I don't really know why we did it. We never had any attraction to each other beforehand, and we certainly never planned on doing it. I think both of us just liked the idea of being close to someone. We hadn't felt the touch of someone we loved for so long that I think it was just a way of coping. In total, we banged probably 14 or 15 times over the course of 2 years. After that, we just stopped. Don't really know why. We just got over the feeling of being unloved, I guess. No one knows as far as I'm aware. It never negatively affected our relationship, and it isn't awkward between us. It was just something that happened. Something is very wrong with this, and I can't figure out what it is. Is it the semi-incest, or is it the bonding through grief thing? That's so weird. That's so weird. Our collective mother just died. You know what? Not gonna finish it. Story 5. One Christmas, my uncle brought my future aunt-in-law over to meet everyone. I was 12 and she had big boobs, like stupidly big. I got binoculars as a gift as part of a kid's spy kit. I thought I was being so clever to pretend to look around the room with them just so I could stealthily, she was sitting 10 feet away, get a full zoomed in image of those lovely jubblies. I did this for like 30 minutes. Story 6. I know someone who got pregnant from a guy and then later married him. No problems yet. Then, though, the girl's mom and the guy's dad got together and had their own kid. So now the original couple has a brother together. The baby has a sister and brother married to each other, but they were married before any of the weird crap happened, so... Story 7. Briefly, during high school, my girlfriend's parents were on the rocks. The mom was sleeping with another guy, and the family was in rough shape. So the dad's response was to go after my single mom. Next thing you know, my girlfriend's dad is having an affair with my mom, while the girlfriend's mom is having an affair with an old flame. They're going on double dates together, and the girlfriend and I are just suddenly unofficial step-siblings. And yes, it was awkward, even though it really had nothing to do with us. Thankfully, it did not last long, maybe a month. Her mom and dad reconciled and things went back to normal. There was one night where they all came over to my mom's apartment with wine. We all drank, the mom and her fling went to a hotel, my mom and the dad went to bed, and then the girlfriend and I went to bed. That was weird. Does that count? Does it answer the question? No, not really, but what? What is this story? Going on double dates with the people you started cheating with that's insane. That's absurd to me. Story 8. Debated using a throwaway account, but it doesn't matter. Everyone I know already knows this if I've ever drawn out my very confusing family tree. I call it the family bush, or shrub. I'm the product of just such a situation, but it's more convoluted than that. You know how everyone has two sets of grandparents, your father's parents and your mother's parents? Well, both sets of my grandparents divorced when my parents were just young kids. And then my father's father married my mother's mother. All of this was a decade or more before I was born. My paternal grandfather legally adopted my mother. She was about 9 years old at the time. And my father was raised by his mother and her subsequent husbands in a separate household. So my parents knew of each other's existence, but weren't raised together. They met as late teens, got pregnant, married, divorced a few months later, and then I was born. Mom was already married to husband number 2 of 5 by the time of my birth, but that's a whole other story. I ended up being adopted by my grandparents at age 2, the ones that are my paternal grandfather and maternal grandmother, which makes me a sort of second-generation son, since they never had any direct kids with each other just in their previous marriages. Odd side effects? I'm related to both sides of the family by blood, and am the only person in this situation, since everyone else can just trace a lineage back to one set of grandparents or the other, but not both. And due to me being adopted by my grandparents, it moves me up a generation, so I'm legally siblings with my own parents. Heck, I'm even my own uncle. Never really grew up around my actual birth parents, but they are both great-grandparents to my own children. My adopted parents have already died, but being raised by Depression-era grandparents definitely made for a different upbringing, not to mention having lived on a boat for years. Again, another long story. I've only had rudimentary discussions with my parents about what it was like for them to be in that situation. Apparently, it was a bit of an uproar in the family, but it all worked out since I'm alive, am fairly intelligent, have all my fingers, and no weird tics or twitches. Best of all, due to their teenage hookups, they now get to see each other at all family gatherings, weddings, graduations, etc. over 40 years later. And this situation made the seating chart at my own wedding a near impossible task, due to me having 3 mothers and 6 fathers. Mom, stepmom, adopted mom, father, adopted father, and 4 stepfathers. While I was being raised into young adulthood, I tended to always act/relate more like a sibling with my birth parents than a parent or child. But this has somewhat changed after the deaths of my adopted parents to a more grandparent/parent relationship. Just seems to make more sense, and it's easier for my kids to relate to. Other odd side effects? I was raised by the grandparents, my siblings by their birth parents. And I'm the youngest in my adopted generation, but the oldest in my blood generation. And due to the multiple marriages in my parents' generation, some of my half-siblings aren't related to each other. One brother and I share a father in common, other brother, sister, and I share a mother, but all 3 have different fathers. So I'm the youngest and the oldest, have siblings, but was an only child, depending on how you look at the situation. I've had people ask me what it was like to have such a weird background. But keep in mind this all happened before I was born or was too young to know the difference, so this is my form of normal. I've never known any other way a family should be set up until I started making my own. I like to think of it that I was wanted and loved by so many people that they had to share. What a wholesome ending to an absolutely insane story. I can't imagine seeing someone you used to hook up with at family gatherings 40 years later. I don't know if that's incredibly lucky or very unlucky. Story 9. I banged my brother-in-law, and my family do know but pretend not to. My sister was married for a short time to a guy who worked and lived abroad most of the year. I never particularly liked the man. I think he wanted to be married to an attractive younger woman who would pretty much do what he said. Also, it was crazy because he was away 8 months of the year, and my sister was young and stupid in a lot of ways. Didn't really get on with his friends and family, and generally felt like she'd been abandoned. Anyway, my sister, rather than live at his home when he was away, would move back in with my parents. He gave my sister access to a certain amount of money, and much hilarity ensued. So I was in my first year of university, and he found out that my sister had been cheating on him. Not only that, she'd done it with several people he knew, and he was, not surprisingly, angry. My parents, being idiots, decided to hire a lawyer who made things worse. And then the issue over what was happening with the money came up. So I came home from university and my family were about to be put out of their home. Also, I should mention he'd paid for some of my university expenses. I'm making this way too complicated, but essentially, I ended up banging him in return for him calming down, and letting my sister and family out of the financial hole that they were in. The banging was pretty weird, and he enjoyed banging me in my sister's bed way more than he should have. In the end, though, he got out of my family's life, and that was the end of it. Story 10. I went to high school with these two girls who had been best friends for most of their lives. In 11th grade, one of the girls started sleeping with the other girl's dad. Older dad too, not a young dad if that matters to you. And then began a relationship with him. Since she was 16, it was technically legal there. It was mortifying for the daughter because it was a small town and everyone knew. It tore the family and their friendship apart. It was awful to witness. I know it's not exactly what the OP asked for, but the question made me think of it. Story 11. Had a fling with my former sister-in-law up until recently. I split up with my ex when she cheated on me back in 2011, and I effectively cut contact with that side of the family, sister-in-law included. Sister-in-law was never on my bad side per se, but it was easier to cut her out and call it a day than to try to surgically remove everyone else but her. She wasn't a model, but she wasn't bad looking either. Her and I got along well enough during my marriage because we married into the insanity. Fast forward to last year. Find out my ex-sister-in-law, I'm long divorced by this point, and ex-wife's brother separated because ex-brother-in-law started banging with someone behind her back. Guess cheating ran in the family. I unblock her and reach out. I've been down this road and know how to handle the family in court, so I figure I'd lend assistance. Meet up with ex-sister-in-law. Help her do some errands. Ex-brother-in-law left nothing for her, not even a car. Then head back and hang out. Started drinking, certain things came out about one another, and next thing I know, we're in the bedroom going at it. We met up a few times until about a month ago. She found a guy that she wants to date, so I stopped becoming her plan B. No one has found out, and I'm pretty sure it'd be a crap show if anyone did. Hence the throwaway for the post. Story 12. My great-aunt married the boy next door at age 18 in 1945 or so. Turns out, he was gay, and he wanted her to be his beard. Very unhappy. Her husband was estranged from his father who had already divorced his mom. So the father-in-law joined the Navy at the outbreak of the war and spent the war building airstrips all over the Pacific and Southeast Asia. He gets back from the war, meets son's wife. He and my great-aunt have instant chemistry. They apparently start banging almost immediately. He's been off at war, and she's in a dry marriage. So lots of pent-up, frisky energy. Of course, they get caught after a while. Mid-act, the son and ex-wife show up. Actually provided a great out for the gay son as soon as he could divorce her, be the wronged party, and now be single with no questions about his sexuality. My great-aunt suffered some social ostracism for this as it was juicy gossip for the city they lived in. However, when the divorce came, she married her former father-in-law. They remained married until his death in the mid-90s, both his age and the year. After nearly 50 years together and 3 kids. Plus grandkids. They were quite happy, but this story has always been one my mom kept from me until I was 30. Story 13. First of all, just for some background, my mom died right when I was born. She was actually really hot, but this isn't about her. I guess that's screwed up to say. Whatever. I actually grew up with my dad's family because my dad had all sorts of emotional issues and he bailed before I was born. So, as you can see, my childhood was pretty screwed up. Anyway, growing up, I feel like there was a lot of distance between me and my sister. When I was about 17 or 18, I first noticed that my sister was a hottie. I don't want to go into too many details about it, but basically what happened is that I accidentally found a video that she made of herself. I knew she didn't make it for me, but I thought she was so freaking beautiful that I watched it twice. I probably would have watched it a hell of a lot more, except that right around that time I found the video, all this crazy crap went down. And I had to leave home. My dad's family, who I was staying with, got in bad trouble with the law. I never talk about it. So I was totally lusting after my sister at that point. She was also having bad trouble with the law. She was actually in custody when I left home. My friend and I went to go pick her up. When I saw her that day after seeing the video, I have to be honest, I just wanted to bang her brains out. Looking back on it now, it's pretty messed up. But I think she had feelings for me too. She actually kissed me right after we came to get her, and it wasn't a sisterly kiss, you know? I mean, it wasn't ridiculously intimate or anything, but it definitely wasn't sisterly. After we left, we all went to crash with my sister's friends. On the trip there, my friend sort of implied that he wanted to get with my sister, and I got a little jealous. He's a good-looking guy, and even though she was my sister, I felt like he was competition. Not much else happened between us for a while except some maybe intimate hugging. Pretty much everyone in my life at that point was wanted by the government, so we moved around a lot. I'm not saying that I'm proud of it or anything, but it was kind of an awesome time. My friend and my sister never hooked up, I don't think. But I thought there was some serious frisky tension going on between them. It was around that time that I got hurt really bad in an accident. It was screwed up, I almost died. But when I was in recovery, my sister came to see me. And out of the clear blue sky, she starts to give me this awesome, slow, passionate kiss on the lips. Sadly, although I guess for the best, nothing ever came of it. We spent some time apart and I started to get really religious, so I tried to not think of her that way. It was actually going well for a long time, like I was totally over her. But I have to say, like a year or so after all that stuff went down, we went out sailing. Not like a date or anything romantic like that. But she was wearing the hottest bikini I had ever seen, and it brought back all the old feelings. A little while later, she actually wound up with my friend from before, the tension guy. I can't say I was surprised, but even after she was shacking up with my friend, there was one time we were at a party, my friend was inside, and my sister and I were outside alone. It was a really intimate moment. I think something might have happened, except that I killed the mood when I told her that Darth Vader was our father and that I had to go face him. Did I just get Star Wars'd? I'm not gonna lie to everyone here, my main exposure to Star Wars was through the Lego Star Wars games. But that sounds a lot like the plot of... Did I read all that and it's Star Wars? If it is, I'm gonna be so mad. Story 14. My college roommate worked at a supermarket. He was banging the married manager of his department for a few months. He then started banging a girl in his class and then started dating. He broke it off with the manager. At some point, he and I went clubbing, and on the way home, he got pulled over for a DUI check. He was sober and gave the cop a hard time for being a jerk. Long story short, he went to dinner with his girlfriend to meet her parents. Her mom was the manager, her dad was the cop. I know they broke up soon after. 20 years later, and we still joke about it when we get together. Story 15. My mom and dad had gotten divorced after she had been cheating with the pastor from our church. Shortly after, my dad remarried. We're talking less than 8 months. My new stepmother was also the mother of a close friend of mine. We had practically grown up together since my dad and she had also been friends since middle school. My friend was 7 months older than me. The situation was already awkward since I had a crush on her daughter for some time. Turns out she was crushing on me too. We ended up secretly dating at 13 and ended up banging pretty frequently. Stepmother caught us in the act when we were 17. Surprisingly enough, she wasn't even upset. She just gave us the usual talk and made sure we were using rubbers. She also started her on birth control. She never told Dad. We stopped the relationship when we went to separate colleges, but still kept in touch. After about 5 years of growing up and being in separate states, we ended up visiting, and restarted the relationship just a year ago. Yes, Dad is aware of the relationship now, though he acknowledged he assumed stuff was happening anyway, but didn't care since we weren't blood related. So now I'm engaged to my stepsister.